Hey, good evening. Tonight it is August the 2nd, 2026 on Sunday. This is Wes Fryer in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I'd like to share with you a few of the things that I learned this week getting ready for tonight's small group meeting that is part of the Project 1526 or the 1526 Project, which you can find at resistance500.com. This is a wonderful spiritual formation curriculum that was put together by Reverend Ben Boswell and Collective Liberation Church here in Charlotte. And I am meeting with others, trying to go for a weekly basis. This was actually just our second meeting. We were able to meet at the beginning of July and then we met here at the beginning of August. But we're going to continue to try and meet weekly, especially now that holiday time for we teachers is drawing to a close. And so I'm going to just share a little bit of the learning. And I also want to share a two-part invitation. Irrespective of where you are in space and time, you can go to resistance500.com and you can get a copy of the curriculum. It's about $15. It's a 120 something page PDF, and it is set up as a weekly devotional and study. It can be done in a small group as we're doing it, or it can be done individually. But I'm also going to invite you, if you're interested and you happen to be seeing this in the fall of 2026, to join us. And you can go to my website, cw.westfryer.com, which stands for Confronting Whiteness, because a big part of this is understanding the unfortunate history of white supremacy and the legacy of white supremacy, the ongoing impact that white supremacy has on our culture. And for me personally, a big reason why I want to do this is because I want to be a culture healer and not a culture warrior. So this week we were learning about the Stono Rebellion of 1739, which, if I had heard about this in school at some point, I don't remember studying this. This wasn't a big thing like the Boston Tea Party or the Stamp Act or the Civil War or something. This just wasn't a big thing. And the little caption to the picture here that comes from the Wikipedia article for the Stono Rebellion and is on Wiki Commons, um, says burning of the Plain de Cap, the massacre of whites by blacks on August 22nd, 1791. Slaves revolted against their white masters, set fire to plantations, and torched cities. And this was in South Carolina. And I want to say at the outset that this study is not in any way a celebration of violence. It is not an encouragement of violence. What it is a opportunity to remember resistance and how resistance began in the Americas in 1526 and how we are part of an ongoing struggle to see all human beings as equal, to see everyone as valuable, and to see each person from a religious standpoint as a being created in the image of God, and to dispense with racism and bigotry and misogyny and white supremacy and these terrible things that continue to have an impact in our society. So, again, this celebrates the 500 years of resistance to what we can call European Christian settler colonialism and slavery. As a follower of Jesus myself, I am extremely concerned and upset by the ways in which the name of Jesus, the name of God, the Bible of the Holy Scriptures has been used historically to oppress people and not to empower people and to lift people up, and to encourage us to love each other and to love our neighbors. So this is a spiritual formation curriculum, and it's been offered up as an alternative to the semi-quincentennial of American independence, the celebration of the 250 years since the signing of the United States Declaration of Independence in 1776. And I probably can say this again, I've said it in other videos, I am extremely proud of the aspirational values of our nation. There are so many things about the United States of America which are wonderful. And as someone who has served in uniform in the United States Air Force, as someone who is an Eagle Scout and has done all kinds of things relating to citizenship, as a current middle school classroom teacher, I think that the values of our country are so important. But we've in addition to being taught values, sometimes been taught mythologies about the United States and about our founding and our history. And I think one of the important ways that we can heal our culture individually and collectively is to confront some of this hard history. And so that's part of what this project is. So the project is divided into separate months. This goes into the month of November. And today we started part two, which is called The Prophetic Tradition of Rebellion. Back in July, we were talking about the settler colonial origins of the Americas, of the United States, and not just the United States, but this is the Americas overall. Um, and, that week two lesson about the doctrine of discovery, the hijacking of Christ, the way in which the Pope was pivotal in emboldening, in empowering, and giving permission to Europeans racialized as white to come over to the Americas and enslave the native people and to commit genocide against them and to just do horrific things. And one of the absolute most important things I think we need to try and do in studying history is resolve to do better. I personally think that I learned too little about colonialism and its impact when I was in school, and I think that we need to find different ways to remedy this, to understand what has happened in the past so we don't repeat those mistakes of the past. So this week, week five, we were focusing again on the Stono Rebellion, what's also called the Sunday Morning Insurrection of 1739. So we start with scripture in these studies, and our scripture verse this time was from the book of Exodus in the Old Testament, Exodus 14, verses 13 and 14. And I'll read these. But Moses said to the people, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm and see the deliverance that the Lord will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you only have to keep still." Now, I'll be sharing some things that I also just learned and discovered in the process of preparing for tonight's small group meeting. And one of those things from the Wikipedia article for Moses is this seal. This was the first proposed seal of the United States in 1776. And again, according to the current English Wikipedia, and this has a citation to it, on July 4th, 1776, immediately after the Declaration of Independence was officially passed, the Continental Congress asked John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and Benjamin Franklin to design a seal that would clearly represent a symbol for the new United States. They chose the symbol of Moses leading the Israelites to freedom. But of course, what we realize today, and I think they knew very well then as well, although they may not have agreed with the values that I'm going to espouse today, is that this land that they were claiming for white people, people racialized as white, and they were claiming it for men. They weren't claiming it for women to have equal rights of ownership, equal rights to vote, equal rights under the law. The title there around this seal, I think, is pretty powerful. It says, "Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God." And one of the things I'm going to talk about here in a little bit is what I will term unchristian nationalism, because we have some confusion today about the flag of the United States and the allegiance that we have to the nation, and then our allegiance to God and to, if we're Christian, to Jesus. And there's some confusion about that, some really big heresy and confusion about that. But aspirationally, what was written in the Declaration of Independence, what's articulated about all people, all humans being created equal and having unalienable rights, I absolutely believe. And that has been an animating aspirational value for people in the United States, for in the Americas and throughout the world. It's inspired the world for centuries. And um, this idea of Moses and the story of the Israelites and God fighting to free and to liberate, in that case, the Jewish people, the nation of Israel, from the bondage and slavery in Egypt, was a very hopeful text and a hopeful story to the enslaved African Americans that languished for centuries here in the United States under the burden of slavery. And even today, even though chattel slavery has been abolished through the 13th Amendment, except for those in prison. Keep that in mind. Slavery is still legal in the United States for prisoners in prison. We are still in a struggle for freedom and for full equality and for justice. So, in the Wikipedia article for the Stono Rebellion, I learned a bunch of things. There's a good reading in the curriculum about the Stono Rebellion as well. This involved 35 to 50 approximately African slaves being killed and approximately 25 colonists racialized as white Europeans. And interestingly, the leaders of this, which was again in South Carolina, came from the Kingdom of Congo, spelled with a K, not a C, as they were Catholic and then also spoke some Portuguese. The leader of the rebellion was named Jimmy. He was a literate enslaved man. He was also referred to as Cato, and that meant that he probably came from the Cato or Cater family. And he led 20 other enslaved Congolese and who may have been soldiers. They had wars in the Kingdom of Congo in an armed march, and they were headed for Florida. And one of the dynamics that was happening here is that St. Augustine was the first successful, long lasting settlement and colony by Europeans in the United States. And it was controlled by Spain, and Spain had promised freedom to runaway Africans. And so they had likely heard about this from different sources, and they were leaving on a Sunday, having been promised freedom as a fugitive slave from British North America, which was what South Carolina was at the time. And so the enslaved Africans who rose up were eventually stopped by a militia group, and they had a battle, and then some of them ran off into the swamp and into the forest, and they were eventually captured, and some of them were beheaded. They also beheaded some of the colonists that were in a store as they seized weapons. Interestingly, you can see here on the right sidebar of the Stone Rebellion article, Jimmy Cato doesn't have a link because there's no additional information about him besides what's in this article. But the leader of the militia, who I think might have been he had a political role as well, was named William Bull, and there is quite a bit of information, which we see in a lot of cases where those racialized as white, the records are a lot more thorough in documenting their lives and their genealogies and things like that. And those that are enslaved, there's generally much less information about them. This is a map of the Kingdom of the Congo about in 1711. This is in the presently, this is the country of the Congo. Or sorry, this is the country of Angola, bordering, I think, on the Congo, which is in Central Africa. And this was a country, again, that had been originally colonized by the Portuguese and was thoroughly Catholic. And so slavery existed here in the Kingdom of the Congo. And so many of these folks were enslaved. But many of these folks had been baptized as Catholics and claimed Catholicism and Christianity as their faith. And so this article about the Kingdom of the Congo goes into some more detail about its extent and how it was an independent state and anyway the history. This isn't stuff that I remember, learning about and studying. I think I'll just speak for myself in my own education. A lot of times the continent of Africa was treated as more homogeneous and not as separate nations. And I think that is a great disservice that we do in social studies and history classes if that happens, because there is such a rich history in Africa and it's a very diverse history as well. One of the very important things that happened as a result of the Stono Rebellion in South Carolina was the Negro Act of 1740. This was passed on May 10th, 1740. And yes, William Bull was the colonial governor. It was in direct response to the Stono Rebellion. And so this comprehensive act made it illegal for enslaved Africans to move abroad, assemble in groups, raise food, even a garden, they couldn't, earn money, learn to write. Interestingly, though, reading wasn't prescribed, but they couldn't write. And additionally, owners of enslaved Africans were permitted to kill rebellious slaves, quote unquote, if necessary. And that act remained in effect until 1865. And as an aside, I have been reading the memoirs of Ulysses S. Grant, the general who commanded Union forces to victory in the Civil War and a two-term president of the United States following the disastrous presidency of James Buchanan, I think, who took over when President Lincoln was assassinated in April of 1865, just days after Appomattox. There's a great three-part documentary on Netflix that I have watched, and one of the things that comes to that I've come to realize, when I was in school in mainly the 1980s in secondary school, with the Civil War, we talked all about states' rights, and this was about states' rights, and the role of slavery was really downplayed. And I do understand that Lincoln and many folks in the North, they didn't go to war to free the slaves. But to say that the Civil War was not about slavery is just ridiculous. If you read the Articles of Secession or the secession document that South Carolina wrote, if you read their Constitution, and then this sort of act, I mean, slavery was the absolute bedrock of the economy of the South. And um, it was a horrible evil, and its legacy continues today in many ways. And part of the way that we can hopefully heal ourselves and our communities and our culture is by learning about this history, and then also learning the ways to help share with others the universal humanity of people and the terrible evil that slavery was, and the ways in which racism and specifically white supremacy continues today to be a menace and a terrible blight and disease that we have within our society. So, part of the study that we do is called the examen. I am familiar with this from my Ignatian Pray As You Go meditation studies that I do most mornings, not every morning, but usually multiple times a week. And I want to focus in on answers to two of the questions. The first one that says, it asks, what appointed hour do you think, quote, the empire thinks I'm most pacified, where I might be, in fact, most free? And then where are my Floridas, the metaphorical places to which we want to go and we aspirationally want to go? And so, in the context of, uh, well, maybe this was more 28. I think I messed that up. So yeah, this is what I want to focus on here is what spiritual or cultural practices of my tradition have been hollowed out into pacification rituals, and what would it look like to take them back? Unchristian nationalism is what came to my mind in this context. And so I want to bring to your attention a article that I wrote in March of 2026, on March 2nd, on my Resist and Heal Substack, which you can find at resistandheal.substack.com. And it was titled Unchristian Nationalism is Heresy. Our Secretary of Defense does not speak for Jesus Christ. I am just horrified and appalled at the ways in which appointed leaders, like our Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, are completely ignoring the separation between church and state and the extremely diverse society that we live in, and the idea that government should not impose a particular religious faith upon anyone. We have freedom of religion and the freedom to worship where we would want to worship here in the United States, but we should not have, for instance, the leader of the Department of Defense pushing his own version, which I would argue is very heretical, and that's why I call it unchristian nationalism of religion and faith upon others. On a much more positive note, um, one of the other members of our group mentioned this story about Finlandia, a song of peace. And in the context of a Florida that we can strive to move to, this is a real powerful song that I did not know about. And so we can kind of contrast this to sort of the jingoistic, sometimes confused situations that we have, particularly in some Protestant churches here in the United States today, when it comes to the 4th of July and the celebration of Veterans Day, and other times where, at sometimes the nation is really exalted beyond what it is appropriate, should be appropriately exalted within the walls of the church, the physical walls of the church. And so Finlandia stands as a contrast to that. So Gene Sibelius reworked this Finlandia hymn, which I think was from like 1899, right around the turn of the century, into a standalone piece. And words were written in 1941 and it became one of Finland's most important national songs. And it says that today, during performances of the full length Finlandia, a choir sometimes sings the Finnish lyrics with the hymn section. And so I'm not going to play this video, but I will include the link to this both in this YouTube video. I'm going to post this on my Heal Our Culture Substack, as well as the WordPress site that I have, which kind of just mirrors those links and those articles, which you can find at healourculture.org, because this was a performance. I think it's by the Indigo Girls. And so, for copyright reasons, I'm not going to play it so I get a copyright strike. But you can, and I'm going to read the words. This is my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for lands afar and mine. This is my home, the country where my heart is. Here are my hopes, my dreams, my holy shrine. But other hearts in other lands are beating with hopes and dreams as true and high as mine. My country's skies are bluer than the ocean, and sunlight beams on clover leaf and pine, but other lands have sunlight too, and clover and skies are everywhere as blue as mine. O hear my song, thou God of all the nations, a song of peace for their land and for mine. May truth and freedom come to every nation. May peace abound where strife has raged so long, that each may seek to love and build together a world united, righting every wrong. A world united in its love for freedom, proclaiming peace together in one song. And that was not part of our curriculum tonight, but it was something that came up in our discussion, especially as we were thinking about our metaphorical Florida that we want to be moving to and resisting the oppressive push of authoritarianism and even fascism that we have here in our country and in other places as well. So I want to encourage you again to visit resistance500.com, get a copy of the curriculum. You do not have to join a small group in order to experience this curriculum, but I think it is a wonderful thing to meet with others, to talk about these subjects, to read these Bible verses, pray these prayers, say this liturgy, and to remember this heritage of resistance. I want to encourage you to visit my website, Confronting Whiteness with Wes Fryer. You can go to cw.wesfryer.com. I'll be posting this link there as well, and other resources, because after each week we meet, I plan to go ahead and share a video, not to share anything confidential, of course, that anybody has shared, but I think it's important to share our journey. And I'm on this journey, and I want to encourage you to be on this journey too, to heal our culture. And part of the ways we do that is by learning our history and by building community with each other. And I believe, as a Christian, praying for the ways that God is inviting us to take action with others, with our brothers and sisters in Christ. You can also visit my website, Heal Our Culture, at healourculture.org. I do have a Substack. If you're on Substack, I do think it's a fantastic platform for connecting with many wonderful voices that I consider to be trusted voices. You can also go to my website, resistandheal.com. I have a Substack for this as well. I've also got a link for trusted voices, and I think I'm going to start a podcast series this year on my main Speed of Creativity podcast channel, which I haven't published a whole lot of in recent years. That's going to focus on trusted voices. Who are the voices you listen to? Who are the voices you consider to be authoritative, to be uplifting, to share truth? Who are those voices? In many ways, I think we live in the best day ever for so many reasons. We have, even though there's all this stuff that's messed up, the medical care that we can have access to. Not everybody has equal access to it, to the food that we have access to, but also to the opportunity that we have to listen to a wide variety of voices to curate our own news feed and to be able to not just have access to whatever happens to be on the on the television, in the newspaper, or on the radio. We really do have a lot of wonderful opportunities. So thank you for your attention. Please share this with others, and I encourage you to join me in being a culture healer, not a culture warrior. Take care.